we have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
This is Multipolarity, charting the rise of the new multipolar world order. Coming up this week.
In Germany, there's been an election, and the Reichstag is on fire with a new cohort of AfD members. Will Keiser Merz see this as his opportunity to seize total control?
After all, on Sunday, the incoming Chancellor decided that Germany can, quote, go it alone, whatever that means. Is the real threat to European democracy about to come from the besieged Christian Democrats?
What exactly is Donald Trump up to? In the past few weeks, America's Sun King has sprayed the geopolitical flak a mile high, from Gaza-a-lago to dropping his piledriver on Zelensky.
In 4 years, everyone went from assuming him merely mad to assuming method in all his madness. Still, no one has yet discerned exactly what that method is.
Of course, this is a PayWall edition, so if you're not feeding us coins, not only will you be left with a vague miasma of guilt, you'll also be leaving us in 15 minutes' time.
That means leaving without 45 minutes of primo audio in which we reveal, plain as day, the truth of Trump's grand strategy.
Would be a hard one to miss out on. You'd really feel kind of bummed.
But first, Kaiser Friederich IV. This week, Germany voted. It was a quite stunning victory, I would say, for the right wing of German politics. The CDU, the centre-right German party, which really patterns onto the Conservative Party in the UK and the Republican Party in the US, gained a little short of 29% of the vote, which got them 208 seats in the Bundestag, which is actually only an 11-seat increase from last time. The big news was AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, which gained almost 21% of the vote, and for that, 152 seats, which was a 69-seat increase on last time. The ruling party, the senior member of the existing coalition, the SPD, which patterns onto the Labour Party in the UK and the Democrats in the US, they were absolutely savage. They were reduced to 16% of the vote and only 120 seats, which was a loss of 86 seats. The Greens also lost ground. They lost 33 seats and now are on only 85. Die Linke, which is the left, which that would pattern onto something like, you know, Bernie Sanders' wing of the Democrat Party or Jeremy Corbyn's wing of Labour. They actually gained 25 seats onto 60 based on 8.3% of the vote. The big news, I suppose, is the FDP, which is a kind of a liberal, right-of-centre, free trade, free market party, something like David Cameron's wing of the Conservative Party, perhaps, or maybe the Blue Dog Democrats. They actually lost all 91 seats that they had in the Bundestag because they failed to meet the 5% vote cutoff to get into the Bundestag. Meanwhile, the BSW, the Bundeswagenknecht, they also missed out, so they didn't gain any votes, which were seats, which was something of a surprise. I think the outcome of this is that, well, in the middle of January, I wrote for the Multipolarity Substack that it was almost certain that the CDU, the centre-right establishment party, would win the election. And it was also almost certain that because of the firewall that the establishment parties have built to exclude the AfD from any type of government, that the CDU would be forced to enter into a coalition with the SPD, which is, as I say, the Social Democratic Party and the existing leading member of the coalition. So the SPD were savaged, but they will find themselves back in government again, it seems, because that's exactly what happened. I was right. I wasn't the only one who thought that, and I think probably the German electorate understood what was going to happen as well. But it does seem that although, as I say, the left of centre establishment party has been absolutely battered by the voters, and it seems that German voters have swung right overall, that the establishment is going to keep hold of government in Germany. And ultimately, that's probably going to mean that the underlying issues that are driving instability within Germany, both on a social level for matters like immigration and on an economic level in terms of things like infrastructure and the deindustrialization process that's going on, these issues aren't going to be dealt with because the CDU is already a kind of establishment party, and now it's going to have to make really significant compromises to form a coalition that doesn't involve the AfD. So I think this has been a big election, a big rejection of the existing government with one party kicked out of the Bundestag altogether and another absolutely savaged, but nothing's actually going to change at all. There's also a very high turnout. There's over 80% turnout.
The first thing to highlight is kind of a gloss on what you're saying, that the CDU will go into government with the SPD. And as we'll talk about later, the CDU seems as aligned on the core issues that are driving problems in Germany, especially the war with the SPD. And so what's happening basically in Germany is another one of these kind of permanent traffic light coalitions is forming that we see across Europe, where no matter who you vote for, you end up getting the same effective people in government. And it's not just because there's a quote unquote uni party, it's because the centre left and the centre right basically become unmoored from their previous ideological affiliations and become kind of a blob party. That spells instability wherever you go, in my opinion. It may be able to hold the line electorally, and it may give some outward semblance of stability, but it restricts the democratic mechanism in your society. The democratic mechanism can't work properly, and so other things have to kick in to try and get things done that people need done. And what happens in those kind of circumstances is that your quality of governance goes down, and people lose more and more trust in the political process. I think this is going to become a general theme of this segment, at least on my side, but a destabilizing Germany kind of scares me more than a destabilizing UK or a destabilizing France. Germany has a history of becoming a little psychotic when it gets unstable politically and economically. And we might talk about some of Mr. Merz's opinions later, which is certainly feeding into that. But another aspect probably to highlight just from a purely electoral point of view is to look at the age groups and how they're voting. So the two biggest supporters of, or the biggest supporter age group of both the CDU and the SPD was 70 and over. So 25% of 70 and overs voted for the SPD. That's the highest out of any age group. And 42% of them voted for the CDU, highest of any age group. So it's the really old people that are maintaining this zombie government. If you go down as you go further down the ladder, the youth become more and more discontented. So 18 to 24-year-olds, 25% of them voted for Die Linke, which is a very far left party. It's still a bit of an Atlanticist party these days. That's why Sarah Wagenknecht had to break away. But it is a very far left party. It used to be considered a communist party, effectively, or at least a socialist workers' party. 21% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted for AfD. So, you know, Linke and AfD among the youth vote are very close. If you go up to 25 to 34-year-olds, you know, these are still pretty young people. 23% for AfD, 15% for Die Linke. 35 to 44, 26% AfD, and then Die Linke starts shrinking back to 8%. But the point here is that even though Sarah Wagenknecht's party didn't break through, and it's showing in terms of actual electoral support gave Die Linke a run for its money, it was just a seat structure that kind of screwed them over. So it will probably grow in the future. Even though it didn't break through, people are voting for very anti-establishment parties. With the very young, that's, you know, actual socialists and AfD. And as you move up the age ladder, AfD become quite prominent all the way up to 35 to 44, where, by the way, I forgot to mention, it is the largest share of the vote. So the party with the most support among 35 to 44-year-olds is AfD. And remember, these people are being told all their lives that, like, AfD are Nazis and fascists and you can't vote for them. So overall, what I'm trying to say is if you look at the age structure, you have a very elderly population maintaining a kind of a husk government in place that we've seen in other countries before, tends to lead to very bad outcomes socially, politically, economically. And the older people who have their pensions are propping that up, and the younger people are really chomping at the bit for some sort of change. Mostly from AfD, but if you go down to the much younger end of the scale from socialism, this looks like a very, very unstable Germany to me. And again, we'll talk about some of Merz's rhetoric in a moment, but I think Germany is the country that you really don't want to become politically and socially and economically unstable. And I think the reason for that is, I don't want to try and psychoanalyze Germany, but history tends to have shown that Germany has these kind of almost bipolar swings where it can be the most stable place in Europe and, you know, the land of Angela Merkel, and nobody talks about politics too much and everyone just works. Or it can be, you know, the Germany of the 1920s and 1930s. And there doesn't seem to be much in between. I don't think there's a lot of tolerance in the German political system and in the German character for anything in between that. I think probably like Britain would be better at kind of, you know, eking something out that it may not be that stable, but it doesn't go completely psychotic in a sense. France will have a different reaction. It'll like have loads of street protests and stuff, but ultimately the enarchs will maintain some sort of stability in the country. Germany has a pretty bad history of becoming quite unstable, quite deranged in a sense when it becomes unstable. So it's worth watching. I don't think this bodes well for the next 4 years of Germany's political or economic situation.
In his book, The Course of German History, which was published in 1945, the great British historian A.G.P. Taylor, who was himself a German speaker, said that the Germans through history had experienced everything except moderation. And I think that perhaps since the German economic miracle of the late 50s and the 1960s, and the stability in West Germany and the impressive way in which they managed reunification and their stable presence within the EU and their almost near reticence in international affairs, we have become used to a Germany that, you know, seems very moderate and stable and quiet and almost kind of beguilingly pacific, if any of that makes sense. I would just like to say, on this election, though, what's really interesting is that despite the huge dissatisfaction with the direction that Germany is going in, to the extent where even Adam Tooze, who, you know, tends to very much toe the establishment, liberal, rules-based international order line, said that he was becoming increasingly concerned that the German establishment had no idea how bad it was or how dissatisfied Germans were. So, you know, when things get that bad that even Adam Tooze is writing such things, we know it's bad. So despite the dissatisfaction with the government, the CDU, the Christian Democrats, the right-of-centre establishment party, who had been the main opposition, only increased their vote by 4 seats in the Bundestag. Hello there, this is Andy Collingwood. I'm here to tell you that the rest of this discussion is for our Patreons only. Now, to become a Patreon of Multipolarity costs you only $5, euros or pounds a month. In other words, a bit less than the cost of a single pint in your average London boozer. Now, we get great feedback and responses from our Patreon, so I do think it's very much worth it. And if you do pay, you'll be able to listen to the rest of this conversation, in which we'll go into what's happening with Europe and a strategic analysis of Donald Trump's grand vision. You'll also get access to our full back catalogue and all our future episodes as well. So please go to Patreon, type in Multipolarity the podcast, pay your £5, bucks or euros a month, and become a Patreon. Be happy, be informed, feel superior. Okay, back to the show.